We can put 3,000 on this credit card. We can ask your dad to make a payment on this one, and we can put forward. And she's like, but honey, we have to buy diapers. And you want to buy a $10,000, but babe, it's going to be worth money. I mean, he had this duffel bag, just stacks and stacks. I don't know if he was laundering money or what he was doing. Since then, I said, okay, every copy that exists that I can find is mine.
Back with us is Rick Gator Whitelock. He'll share which two books are more important to him than Action Comics #1. And we'll learn about two wild comic convention stories.
So this book right here, which is now in a CGC 6.5, in 1972, this exact copy, my dad purchased for me for $0.25. I read the book, loved the book. Parents got divorced, we moved. And like most kids, you think that early comic book collection's gone. Well, my dad was a coin collector and a stamp collector, and I understood condition when it came to collectibles. So although I long since forgotten, this comic book ended up in the back of those old style, speaking of old school, photograph binders, the ones that you went and you ripped it open and it had a little sticky, and I put on the back there to flatten it out because I read it and I read it and I read it, and you rolled up in your back pocket and you ride your bike to the 7-Eleven to buy comics back when they were only 20 cents each, and I forgot about it. And my dad moved to Ohio some 20 years ago, and he gave my wife and I, Bridget, a stack of these photographic binders. And of course, I thought the comic long gone, hadn't thought about it in 20-something years. And we're just looking through these photographs, and at the back of it, she goes, honey, do you remember your Silver Surfer #1? And in the back of one of these binders, sitting there for 20 years, was my original Silver Surfer #1 that my dad bought me back in 1972. So of course I sent it to CDC. It was naturally pressed for 20 years in the back of a magazine. Here it is to this date. So this will be one book that I won't ever sell. So I'm at MegaCon, and this is 2006 or 7. A nice 1.0 Superman 1 back then was $10,000. A lot of, today it's 100,000. Back then it was $10,000. And we had it was a father and a mother. They had their baby in a stroller. And he came up, and he had come up to my booth Friday and Saturday, and now it's Sunday afternoon. And he wanted that Superman 1. Comics are valuable. And I still remember him saying to his wife, I've got $2,000 on this credit card. And I can hear them because they're standing right, 10 feet away from me. We can put 3,000 on this credit card. We can ask your dad to make a payment on this one, and we can put forward. And she's like, but honey, we have to buy diapers. And you want to buy a $10,000, but babe, it's going to be worth money. I know it. I mean, we'll struggle for a little bit, but I know it'll be worth money. Now, in hindsight, he was right. But at the time, I wouldn't sell it to him. And one of the reasons is because splitting up credit cards over multiple purchases at a convention, it's kind of like PayPal. You can't show that each one's a separate transaction. But the real reason was I looked at her, and she, behind him, she's going, no, like this to me. Do not. No, no, no. And so I had to come up with my reasons, and I told him the reason was we can't split over multiple credit cards, which I came to find out actually was true. The real great one, I still remember the guy walked around with a briefcase full of cash, and he was going in Chicago Comic Con, and this was maybe 2011. More Fun 73 had just kind of popped because of the Aquaman and because of
Green Arrow. And Speedy.
Thank you very much. Well, it had finally popped. It's a book that, and Ben will remember this, or maybe he doesn't. I had like 7 copies because I love that book. It was a Golden Age key, the one on the cover. I had like 7 copies on the bottom shelf. And in San Diego, I used to set up next to Harley Yee. And Harley came over there, and I think Ben may or may not have been in the booth because he was with me a lot in San Diego. And Harley goes, Rick, why do you have all those copies? You're never going to sell them. It's like All American 61. I love that book, but I couldn't sell them to save my life. And so book finally popped. And things like that are fantastic. But I still remember the guy came in with he had this duffel bag, just stacks and stacks. I don't know if he was laundering money or what he was doing, but he came out and bought like 4 All-American 61s and like 5 of my More Fun 73s, like a month before the big Heritage auction. And so he bought them for whatever it was, $37,000. And I think those 8 or 9 books we calculated at the height a year later with all the big things were like $480,000. So he had made 10 times his money, just timing it perfectly. But I still remember thinking to myself, is this guy laundering money with this bag full of cash? And they're all $100 bills, and I put my little counterfeit pen on all of them, and they were all good. The second book that will always be with me, that I didn't have this copy until 2008. Vinny Zerzola had it on the Metropolis website, and I saw it, and I called him and had to have it. This is Wiz 22. It's known as the Impossible cover. It's got both Billy Batson and Shazam on the cover. This happens to be a CDC 9.4, the Mile High copy, which if you're familiar with the church books, hopefully is the nicest copy in existence. For a while there, I bought every copy of this book I saw at conventions. Most dealers knew if they got a copy in, call Rick, he's going to buy it. I think I had about 50 copies in my possession at one time, which was bad for collectors because if it showed up, whether it was on heritage auctions, common, whatever, I won it. I remember one time bidding to like $3,000 on a low grade copy just because somebody wanted it as much as I did, and I had to have them all. But the story of this is I was with my grandmother in 1975. Again, had been introduced to comics 3 years earlier, and back then there was a Shazam show on TV. Billy Batson rode around with Mentor in the big Winnebago. If any of y'all remember that Shazam show, you can go back. It ran 3 seasons. And so my grandmother made me a costume, or wanted to make me a costume. Back then they sewed. But we didn't have references, nor did I have a 1940 comic book there in 1975. So we drove down to a used bookstore and found, if my memory's clear, it probably was the 1975 oversized Treasury edition they redid, but it was the Impossible cover. And my grandmother sewed me this Captain Marvel costume. I ran around her house that entire summer that I stayed with her. I got hit pretty good on the back of the legs with a broomstick when I jumped from furniture to furniture, trying to fly through the air. Sometime in the mid 90s, my wife and I went to visit my grandmother who had succumbed to Alzheimer's. And she basically had not had any cognizant or period of lucidity in years. And something happened that day where as she's rocking in her chair, and my wife and I are sitting with her, a little light comes on her face, and she remembers, she remembered the costume. And we relived for about the 5 minutes of lucidity, the moment that we went out and found a copy of this comic book, and she made me the costume. And then of course the light went back off and she went back into her rocking stare, and that was the last time she ever had any moment of lucidity. So for me, having stayed with her during the summers when the parents would go on vacations and stuff, and having her made me that costume, I went out and I actively bought every copy that I saw anywhere, websites, before websites, conventions.
Can you briefly share the story of at the TampaCon, I think, when there was a kid that wanted a copy, and I think he was bidding and you outbid him?
In 2016, I set up at the Tampa Comic Con every single year, and this father and son had been to our booth the year before and had seen it, and we talked. And I would show people, or people would get to know Wiz 22, and come to find out that I had won or outbid him in a heritage auction for a copy. And so the next year I promised him that I would bring him a copy, and I found one of the, like I said, I had 50 of them, and I found a copy that I had in one of my boxes, and the presented, and he asked the dad how much he should pay for it, and I forgot, he said 508, but I gave the kid the copy. And he came back probably for the next 3 years that we did the camp, and every year always made sure he came by, said hello, always had he eventually wore a Wiz 22 t-shirt that he had bought or something. Dad and son forever grateful. He's now this really cool collector. So Wiz 22 and Silver Surfer 1 will be the 2 comics that will always be with me and always have that kind of sentimental grab at my heart, emotions and things like that.
If you enjoyed Rick's stories, please give this video a like. And if you'd like to hear about the 5 comic books that are most personally important to me, check out this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you around real soon.